Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of History You Didn't Know But Should. I'm Ray.
And I'm Chris.
And today we're going to be doing yet another installment of episodes on famous historical locations in the United States. Today, we're looking at Lady Liberty, the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, here we have, Ray, this national treasure, and it's probably one of the most recognizable statues in all of the world. And there's so many different meanings and symbolism behind it, but it is truly that. It is a statue that stands for liberty, for freedom. Some would even say for justice for all. So I'm really looking forward to this episode because especially when we think about immigrants who were coming into America from Europe in those areas, this was the first thing that they saw that kind of let them know that their old life was over and a new life was beginning. This was going to be the beginning of a new journey for them. Not necessarily a journey of complete, freedom from all things, but it was a new way to life. And, Ray, it really is a symbol of freedom and of inspiration and of hope, but it's got an interesting background as to how it even became where it is today.
Yeah, and in previous episodes, we've looked at the White House, we've looked at the Capitol building, we've looked at the Washington Monument. And I think for each of those episodes, we've talked about the iconic nature of the building. For the White House, when people think of the United States, they may think of the White House. They may think of Capitol Hill, even though they may not, in certain parts of the world, they may not be able to know the difference between the two buildings, But when you think of the Statue of Liberty, I'm sure that is just as iconic of an image for the United States as either one of those other two buildings.
Yeah. And this one, what's, I guess, a little bit different is that when we look at the Statue of Liberty, it is that symbol of freedom, but also it was a gift. It was seen as a partnership between France and America. And, I find going back into history, when you start thinking about Thomas Jefferson and we think about the Declaration of Independence and this American movement, when America broke away from Great Britain, France looked at that. I think France looked at it with envy. Some of the French citizens, they saw it was like, oh, we want that. And, America was kind of the spark to the French Revolution. And you start to see this through the Statue of Liberty being this close relationship between France and America, but also the shackles of being oppressed kind of being broken away as well. So I guess really this idea, what is it, Ray? It kind of comes around late 1800s or mid 1800s. Is that about right?
Yeah, it was toward the end of the American Civil War when a French historian actually came up with the idea of some sort of a monument or a statue for the United States in recognition of the United States' being this, I don't want to say icon of freedom, but being this workable democracy, this workable government that had made it work. And of course, it's very interesting to me that it's at the end of the Civil War, 1865, 1866, when this French historian comes up with this idea, because I'm thinking that would be the worst time maybe to come up with this idea. But this is when he did come up with the idea of doing some sort of project, some sort of a monument or statue for the United States. And like you said, it was a joint effort. It wasn't just simply the French saying, okay, here's your statue 100%. The Americans, as we're going to see, had to build a platform, a base for this statue, number one. But number two, they also had to put it together. So this is going to be work on both sides. But the French, of course, as you know, they're going to be the ones that are going to create this magnificent structure.
And timing is significant because it's 1865 when you start planning for this, but it's not going to be long before you have the 100-year anniversary of freedom.
Mhm.
And this Frenchman, Edouard de La Boulaye, I love that French accent. I cannot speak. Bonjour.
I can't do it. That's why I rarely will say these names when it comes to French history, because I cannot say their names. It just doesn't sound right when I do it.
Right. But this, he was, La Boulaye, who said, I think this is an appropriate time to present a gift from the French to the American people to symbolize the Declaration of Independence. You got 100 years. We've got a good relationship. France and America does. But also going back to your time period, is it the right time? Well, this was the time that we start to see the abolishment of slavery. So there is this symbolism of liberty and of freedom. And so, La Boulaye wants to do this big proclamation. And while he's doing this big proclamation, there is this sculptor that's there who starts thinking, well, words are great, but putting something into place that will be long lasting, that people will be able to see and to enjoy and to remember. And so he begins, drawing or creating this design that, he kind of starts out saying it's going to be called Liberty, enlightening the world. And, he's thinking about a crown, he's thinking about a person, something that deals with independence. So there's some interesting things that kind of go along with that. But Ray, one of the things I thought that was interesting as we start getting into this whole idea is that some people think that the model that he was the sculptor, which was Bartholdi, I think it was his name,
Yep.
is that he was creating it after, some people say it was Liberatus, I think, Libertas, who was the Roman goddess of freedom. But then there's others who thought that it was, this Egyptian figure. And where there's this woman who has a robe on, and she is kind of like carrying the light to a new area. So it's not a simple, I'm just going to pick out this person, we're just going to model it, because Ray, some people even said it resembled his mama.
Yeah.
So that has something to do with it too.
Yeah, and it's not cheap when you think about putting together a statue of this. If you think about if you're going to commission a painting, that's going to cost money, but what are your supplies? What do you need for that painting? It's, this is going to be something totally different, and they're going to have to raise money. And even though their idea is to have this statue ready for 1876, the centennial anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, it's not actually even going to begin work on the facade of the structure until a year before that in 1875. So it's going to take, almost 10 years from the time the project was first imagined to when the project is actually going to be ready to go, because they're going to have to raise money. And, and raising money is not always easy, is it?
No, and once again, we've talked about the struggles of raising money for the Washington Monument. We've talked about the struggles that came, with the Capitol and with the White House. And even here, this is interesting because France basically says, hey, we got the statue. We'll pay for the statue. All we need for you to do, American people, is give us enough money for the pedestal. So you do the base, we got the statue. Well, Grover Cleveland, was like, no, I'm not going to use state funds. He was the governor of New York during the time. He was like, no, I'm not going to use state funds. Congress, typical Congress, can't decide how much money they want to give for that particular base. So they tried to establish some fundraising committee. That doesn't come together. But I guess, have you heard of those things like crowdsourcing or Kickstarter or GoFundMe, all of these things? So we really have our first GoFundMe initiative that starts with the Statue of Liberty, in which there's a group of people that get together and say, okay, well, let's try to raise money ourselves. And it is fascinating to me that the one who is behind all of it is Joseph Pulitzer, who is
Yeah.
just a fascinating individual in himself, who is known for the Pulitzer Prize, one of the first newspapermen, competing against William Randolph Hearst. And what he decides to do is say, here's what happens. If you'll give some money for the Statue of Liberty, I'll put your name in the paper and offer you a reward for the largest contributor. And Ray, you've got children, street cleaners, politicians, you've got anybody and everybody that's given, whether it's a penny, given a dollar, given whatever it is for this. In just 5 months, they raised over $100,000 from like 160,000 donors. Ray, that's pretty impressive to get something off the ground that people really don't know what it is. And it's not even going to be in their city.
Yeah. And what he does in Eiffel, by the way, Eiffel Tower, he's responsible for that as well. But what he does is he's going to create these large he's going to have these large copper sheets, and he's going to hammer them out into the skin, to be the skin of this structure, right? And he's got somebody else that's going to create the skeleton, the internal skeleton of the structure. So they're literally just going to hammer this thing out and put it together and sort of put it as like a skin over that metal skeleton that is going to be the infrastructure of this statue. And not only that, and this is one thing that I did not know, and Chris, you may have already known this, but one thing I did not know was that the skeleton and the skin of it, the way it's put together, the way it was designed, allows the skin to move a little bit. You know, with the strong winds there, they knew it was going to face in the New York Harbor, that it needed to be able to flex a little bit. And that's going to lead to something I want to talk about a little later. Rumors about the facility being haunted. But that it is able to sort of flex a little bit. Reminds me of, tall skyscrapers. They do have that flexibility, so they may sway a little bit, but that's actually a good thing because it allows some give instead of the structure being so rigid.
Yeah, and I think I remember reading somewhere, doing research for this, that it sways up to 3 inches in any direction, which I don't know. You can still kind of go up into the crown, and I just don't know if I would be willing to be up there with it swaying, 3 inches.
But you're willing to go into the Washington Monument.
I am, because it's a box, I think. I don't know what it is. It's just, I don't know. Maybe my crowning achievement will be to go up into the Statue of Liberty. Maybe. I had to throw it in there. But at the time, this was a crowning achievement when Lady Liberty is dedicated, because it's this symbol of friendship. It's a symbol to the end of slavery, and the two French guys are hoping that it will be a symbol for France. But Ray, not everybody's happy with this. And timing, once again, you've got many African Americans who are really upset by the Statue of Liberty, because they look at it and they see that it is nothing but hypocrisy. Because yes, slavery is ended, but we start to see the rise of Jim Crow. We see the less oppressive tactics by the North towards African Americans. And African Americans coming out of slavery are just not buying into the fact that America is now a land of equality and justice and liberty. And so I think that Bartholdi kind of saw that somewhat, which is why if you look at the bottom of Lady Liberty, there's Lady Liberty's holding those broken chains, right? But even some people found that to be controversial, and so they put it at the feet, right? Because I think it was supposed to be in her hands or something, but they were afraid it would cost too much, and so it's at the bottom of her feet, which kind of does it more subtle, I guess. But not everybody was happy with it, but it was a monumental feat, because you had these two countries coming together to make it happen.
Yeah, and remember the design was for this to be completed by 1876. But not only is it not completed by 1876, the 100th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, it was 1885, 9 years later, by the time this thing was taken apart, because it was assembled there in France. It was taken apart, put in like 200 some odd crates, and shipped across the Atlantic Ocean to the United States. And I've got a desk in another room that I've got to put together, and I'm absolutely dreading doing it. But can you imagine getting a shipment of 200 crates with this huge statue in it that's going to be over 300 feet tall when assembled? Oh, that's work for you right there.
Especially if all the instructions are written in French.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be a problem. I don't read French.
I mean, just think about that. It's coming into America, and you have to. I mean, it is putting the pieces together to a very difficult puzzle. And the other thing that goes on to this, Ray, is what you mentioned earlier, that it's created with a thin layer of copper, and the research was showing that it's 2 pennies thick, I think, or 2 pennies thin, I guess is the actual thing of it. It's not, I mean, it's not this thing that is, just really structurally sound, if you will, on the outside, because it's so thick. But Ray, when we start thinking about the construction of it, I'm sure our listeners are going to ask the question, how and why is it green? And there's a simple reason to it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not green by nature. That sounds like the title of an album or something. But it's not green by nature. What's going on is that the wind in the harbor, the rain, the sunshine has faded or changed the color of the copper to that green tint. I'm not sure what the original color of the statue was.
I think it was brown. But because of that, and this is talking to my science people out there, I think the term is oxidation, that everything started to change. And so it turned from brown to a bit. And you've seen this because if you take a penny and you know how you leave a penny outside in the sun and in the weather, it eventually turns that sea green color. So for our listeners out there, if you want to do a science experiment about it, just take a penny, throw it out there and watch it turn green after a while.
But can you imagine? I can't imagine the Statue of Liberty being brown, and maybe because it's been green my whole life, but it's like, I don't know that it would be
it wouldn't be the same, would it?
I mean, you wouldn't know any different. It wouldn't be like, oh, well, that's disappointing. But I think the green makes it pop a little more, makes it stand out a little more.
Well, especially when you have the way that they did the crown, and then also the water, and the sun reflecting off of that. And I agree with you. We wouldn't know it as anything else. And I think that it is important to see that even through the scientific, I mean, I'm pretty sure that these guys didn't say, oh, and in a few years it will turn from brown to green and it will create this beautiful hue against the water. I mean, they didn't think through that. It was just a gift. And yet it is a gift that has really transformed into something that is absolutely beautiful. And as you mentioned, I mean, if you look at, you got the pedestal, but then you have this, huge statue. And I think you said it was 300 feet tall. I found this to be interesting that she has a 35-foot waistline. And she wears a size 879 shoe.
Wow.
I don't know if you can get that at Stride Rite or Rack Room or anything like that.
Don't think you can.
Yeah.
I don't even think Amazon will sell that.
No. And if the shoe fits.
Well, that's why she has to wear the robe.
And, I did not know this. And so I really love studying about this because I didn't know this, that the Statue of Liberty, if you look at it, she's not standing still. That if you look at his design, her right leg is in mid stride and her right foot is actually leaving the ground. It's like she's marching forward. That, and there you go, right? Immigrants are marching to a new land.
And not only that, we saw it marching in Ghostbusters 2 when it marched down the street of New York to kill the ghost in the museum there. So, we saw it march. I mean, it can march. We know this. I don't know how the steel beams and that copper skin managed to do it, but it did.
Here I am trying to make this impassioned plea that the Statue of Liberty is leading the way and lighting the path to freedom. And you've got Marshmallow Man and all of these other people out with Ghostbusters too.
Well, probably, I think most people would agree Ghostbusters 2 of the trilogy is probably the worst of the three movies. So.
Well, and there's some symbolism, I guess, just as there's symbolism with Ghostbusters 2. There's some symbolism to the Statue of Liberty. And I guess just real quick, it is important for our listeners to kind of see that each element does have something that's there. We talked about the broken shackles, at the feet, which is the abolition of slavery. Of course, you can't get real up close to it, but Lady Liberty is holding a book that is, for some reason, in Roman numerals, not in French, it's not in American, Roman numerals, that has July 4th, 1776, which is, of course, Declaration of Independence. The crown has 7 points on it, symbolizes the 7 seas or the 7 continents or even the 7 rays of sun, which is saying that Lady Liberty is trying to do freedom, not just in America, but all around the world, and that the U.S. is the example for that. So pretty interesting things about old Lady Liberty. But Ray, it's also interesting, you were talking about swaying and things of that nature. But it used to be you could climb all the way to the top. But then something happened. And
you used to be able to go all the way into the
thing, the balcony where the globe, the crown, not the crown, but the light, the flame, whatever you call that, lantern. Yeah. The torch.
The torch.
We'll get it out there.
The torch. You used to be able to go all the way to the torch, and I'm trying to remember why it was closed. Let me check my notes. But it had something to do.
It was World War One.
Yeah, World War One. Yes. It was one of the world wars. I couldn't remember. Yeah.
You remember that in World War One, I forget what they called it, like Black Tom or something like that. But the German spies came in and planted explosives. Mm-hmm. And it was so many explosives that it actually blew out the windows all the way to Times Square. The statue's arm was damaged, the torch was damaged, and that happened in 1916. And Ray, they don't fix it until 1984 when you've got now what's known as a 24 karat gold leaf. And the actual original torch is actually in display at the museum there.
Yeah, it's displayed in the museum within the base. Yeah.
It
took me a minute to remember what was going on. I remember reading.
That's a huge thing that we don't talk about is how close World War One really was in America. I mean, these German spies were here and they did terrible damage right there in New York.
Yeah, but we talk about the symbolism of the statue. But the statue actually, until the early 1900s, so it didn't last very long, served as a navigational aid for sailors.
Right.
But of course, that didn't last that long. But so it did serve that practical purpose.
And there's been a lot of weird things. Of course, as you mentioned, Lady Liberty is found in movies everywhere. It is on every, promotional thing about freedom. But if you look at it, David Copperfield, he made it disappear. We had a lot of other things that were going on, but
has it come back after he made it disappear?
I know, it's amazing. I don't know how he did it. I watched it. It was, I think, I forget when it was. It was the 200 and I don't know, 250 or something. I watched it. I was younger and I watched it. I just thought he was the coolest thing ever. But I don't know how it happened. But Ray, I have to ask the question: you've always had a story about ghosts in all of these that we've talked about. There's no way that the Statue of Liberty can be haunted, is it?
Well, probably not, but it does have stories as being really creepy. And I think, going back through its history, there have been claims that people have heard things inside the Statue of Liberty, heard mysterious knockings and mysterious noises. But I think it's pretty easy to quote unquote debunk some of these stories because of the way it is built. Remember, this is that metal infrastructure with that copper skin on it, and it is made to sway and to move a little bit. So as it sways in the wind, as the heat of the sun and the cool of the night impact the structure itself, it's going to pop. It's going to make those noises, and I think that's what it is. But I did read where when you talk about people who were supposed to be in, guarding it or whatever, sometimes they would be like, "No, I won't do that. I'd rather give up my post than to be there." It can be a very spooky place with the popping and the cracking that the structure makes at certain times. But is it haunted? Probably not. But again, we saw it in Ghostbusters walk down the street. So, if it can walk down the street, you never know.
And one final fact that I'll have about this Statue of Liberty is Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison, the inventor of the light bulb, he actually proposed to put a gramophone inside the Statue of Liberty because he wanted her to speak. So think about that for a second. If Lady Liberty actually would speak, ultimately they said, "Dude, I am so proud of you for inventing the light bulb. That is really cool. You got the photograph. That's awesome. Stop." I mean, that's enough. Move on. Not going to do it. So that idea was rejected.
But she doesn't need to speak. Her very presence speaks.
There you go.
It doesn't. We don't need to have some voice emanating from the Statue of Liberty, but. Yeah, I didn't know about that, but that would be disturbing on all sorts of levels.
It would be disturbing, and it would have taken away from the power of her silence. Also, the silence is that freedom, liberty, justice, equality. It means something different for every individual. For the Europeans coming across, it meant something. For the enslaved, it meant something. For people in our generation, it means something. For people today, it means something. I mean, the Statue of Liberty is a living, breathing symbol that in silence speaks in its majesty, beauty, and grandeur. And it's something that we should look at with awe and great appreciation for what it symbolizes today.
And I think that's a great place to put a period on the story of the Statue of Liberty. We hope our listeners have enjoyed this episode. Please share this episode. Remember, we are on Facebook and Twitter. You can find us on iHeart, Spotify, Sounder, Google, and almost anywhere where you get your podcast. Just look up History You Didn't Know But Should. If you have a show suggestion or a comment, please leave it on our Facebook page, Twitter page, or reach out to us by email at historyyoushouldknow@gmail.com. That's history, the letter you should know, @gmail.com. Until next time, I'm Ray.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you later.